Rescue was a team effort involving several agencies working together. As KLTV7's Jamie Boyum reports, the Judson Fire Department did not have aerial rescue gear, but did provide important logistical ground support.
He works for Longview Fire, but Chris Jackson is also Judson ESD-3 fire chief. On duty in Longview Saturday morning, Judson and Longview were two of the agencies called about the hot air balloon.
And they initially told us that there was a hot air balloon stuck. We were thinking probably in a tree or some type of high area. When we got on scene, it was much more than that.
They knew the power had to be shut down to the tower because of the dangers.
With anything from electrical to also FM radiation that's coming off the tower. So anything we can do to mitigate to make that situation better. That's kind of the process that we started when we first got there.
A tower engineer helped make sure the generator also stayed off. As other first responders joined them, Judson set up staging areas to aid in the aerial rescue.
We had tarps out there so they could stage their equipment, what truck and apparatus it came off of. Also, with people like the media and the public and stuff showing up and family members, we had to establish hot zones and warm zones in different areas to keep people staged.
He says with any extended incident, they are medically responsible for the crews.
We were keeping track of the time, how long they were up there, and then when they came down, if they did come down, we would send them over to medical rehab.
He says that didn't happen since the rescue went so quickly.
Anything we could do on the ground to make their operation more efficient is what our guys provided.
Although 4 hours may seem like a long time, the chief says the rescue was
the highest and then also in the shortest time frame.
Jamie Boyum, KLTV 7 News.
Now, Chief Jackson tells us there were at least 50 first responders working that scene Saturday.